Radio, its employees, or sponsors.
On your mark. Set.
You're listening to The Runaround with Brad Jager and Greg Jubb.
On Baltimore's home for ESPN Radio, ESPN 1300.
Once every 4 years, runners and endurance athletes everywhere get their Christmas, and that, of course, is the Olympics. Hey everyone, this is Greg Jubb alongside Brad Jager and Ryan McGrath, and we're going to talk about that today and more here on The Runaround on ESPN 1300. The show is brought to you by Hollywood Sports. If you're looking for the widest selection of running shoes and gear, check out Hollywood Sports online at hollywoodsports.com or visit their Baltimore showroom on Pulaski Highway. And be sure to visit us at runningmaryland.com, where you can get all of the latest videos, photos, results, news, and more for all the area's races. Or if you're interested in having your race organized by one of the area's premier event management companies, be sure to check us out at runningmaryland.com. Guys, the Olympics. Now, I got to mention this right now. Ryan McGrath, my co-host here, has done such a good job of his own media blackout. Doesn't follow any of the results earlier than they are broadcasted on NBC's coverage, televised on primetime or in the morning. So, Ryan, how's that been going, my friend?
3 days, and I gotta say, it's tough. Saturday morning particularly, because it was the men's cycling road race. Now, normally this is something I would literally spend 6 hours in front of the TV watching, but I had to get in my own bicycle ride that day, so it was a matter of just getting it taped. As soon as I got home, going back in, hitting the DVR. I'm a DVR master. I mean, I can finagle that with the best of them. I can watch 6 hours of TV in less than 2. And I caught myself up and did it Saturday, did it Sunday, doing it again today.
No, I didn't see that until Facebook. I didn't know that about you until I saw it on Facebook last night, and I got to say, I tried to do the same thing. It's difficult. In the age that we live in with social media and just televised coverage, the internet, it's almost impossible. But nonetheless, you've managed to do it thus far, and I take your word for it, so hopefully you can continue to do that throughout the Olympic cycle here.
I tell you what's going to be tough, though. Once Friday hits and we have track and field on, that is where it's probably going to start getting a little difficult, and I'm sure it is largely related
So everybody text Ryan with the results of today's swim.
And presumably, we're on the air because we're supposed to be the experts, and he's going to have to juggle handling the media blackout here and still knowing the results ahead of time so we can talk about it next Monday. Of course, track coverage starts on Thursday, starting with the women's 10K. We'll be happy to talk about all that on Monday and all the events that pass. In the meantime, though, before we get to Brad's thought of the day, where he can talk about his issues with the younger generation and why the young people are not shaping up, I got to mention something here. Speaking of the Olympics, our Go for the Gold contest on Facebook, brought to you by us at the Runaround and Running Maryland and Hollywood Sports, have a chance here to win $100 to Hollywood Sports, which is effectively good for a pair of shoes and more of our good friends at Hollywood Sports. Go on Facebook, the Runaround on ESPN Radio. Click like and click our app, Go for the Gold contest. It's really simple. All you have to do is predict how many medals, gold, silver, and bronze, you think the American track and field team, including the marathoners, will win at this year's London Olympics. Now, the deadline is August 2nd, so get online now. Go to the Runaround on ESPN Radio on Facebook. Click the Go for the Gold contest app. All you got to do is make 2 simple predictions, follow the steps.
And put in your name. That's probably pretty easy for most people.
Yes.
Okay.
Please put in your name. We want to know who you are if you win.
Right.
But check it out on Facebook. Go for the Gold contest, the Runaround on ESPN Radio. Brad, please tell us your thought of the day.
All right, Gregory. I've been going around the state this past week doing a lot of interviews for getting ready for cross-country previews for high school cross-country season. And what's been amazing to me is the few miles that even the good high school runners have been putting in during this summer. The only way to get better is to run. You can't get better running by swimming. You can't get better running by going to the beach and walking on the beach. You can't get better running by watching television or playing with your DVR. The only way to get better running is to go out and run. It's good to take a week off after the season ends, then get back into it slowly. But at this point in the season, if you want to get better, you should be out there doing 2-a-day runs. In the Olympics, Michael Phelps has admitted that he hasn't put in the volume of work this year that he did in the past, and so has his coach, and his performance has suffered. Ryan Lochte, on the other hand, has said that he's put in a lot more work this past 4 years, and he's taken over as the #1 swimmer on the U.S. squad. So if you really want to see the results at the end of the season, you need to be out there running now.
There you go. Heard it from the man himself, who last week admitted that when he was a high school lad, was covering about 90 to 100 miles per
90?
week, because that's what they did. And if you want to hear that, now Brad said it straight from the horse's mouth.
Yeah.
Go to runningmaryland.com or the runaroundradio.com, listen to last week's show and hear it. This guy right here, if you can see him in the booth right now, moving with such fluidity as he does every day.
I'm trying not to burp.
At one point, he did run 90 to 100 miles a week, so yes, he can speak from experience.
But that was the way it was back in the 70s. I mean, I talked about long, slow distance last week with Amy Hurst. And, you know, that's the way we did it. You went out and ran, and that's all you did. We didn't have television. We didn't have cars when I was growing up. We just had horses.
There you go.
So
And of course, he's dealt with a lot of young athletes throughout the week, because Brad has been at Morgan State covering the
Oh, yeah.
junior nationals, junior Olympics, correct?
Olympic Nationals.
So we're going to be talking about that, a lot of good performances. But for now, let's talk about the Olympics that have happened thus far. Our cycling specialist here, Ryan McGrath. What do you think of that? Alexander Vinokurov of Kazakhstan takes the gold. Now that was quite an interesting race.
Kazakhstan, you know, Alexander Vinokurov has an up and down history in the sport of cycling. He, back in 2003, had a great Tour de France, and shortly thereafter tested positive for performance-enhancing drugs. Took his ban, came back. Whether you are a fan of that rule or not, he was allowed to compete again, and he was riding the Tour de France this year as his last, as this is going to be his last season, and really wanted to go out with a bang. So he got himself into the break. The break was huge, like 30 guys in this breakaway. They, largely fueled by American TJ Van Garderen, who was 5th at this year's Tour de France. They just stayed away from the peloton, couldn't be caught, and then if you haven't watched it, you should watch the replay. If you are a cyclist, Vinokurov was just super heads up, 8K to go, break with broke away from the breakaway, and just got the jump on him in the last 200 meters and gets the gold. So great race for Vinokurov. And in the women's race the next day, Maggie Voos from Netherlands, similar situation, 3-woman break, and just great race in the rain. And these are such long events. They're longer than any other individual single event in the Olympics. The men's road race was 155 miles, 6 hours on your bike. Just absolutely incredible to watch.
And Vinokurov, as I understood it reading his story, it was a major obstacle to get over ending his career. He was pretty set on it last year in 2011. So to come back and do this is pretty impressive. And it seemed like he really executed his tactics well. He said, I have to break away now because I'm not going to be able to finish a sprint in the back of the pack right here.
He's a strong rider, and the stage of the Tour de France for me that stands out as his all-time best was the stage on Bastille Day, I think it was, into Gap, where Lance Armstrong famously had to cut across a field, and Vinokurov had just left everybody. And he's the type of rider that's dangerous from a distance out. He may not win in a heads-up sprint, but then he won the stage on the Champs-Élysées that same year Tour. Just in a small little breakaway, which doesn't often happen because that's usually reserved for the sprinters. So the guy has talent, regardless of his past. He's a talented bike rider. So
and I believe in second chances. As long as he stayed clean, I believe
Right.
in letting them ride.
You also wonder what was going on because Bradley Wiggins was in the race, who won the Tour de France convincingly. Mark Cavendish was in there, who they were trying to get to the front, and everybody just seemed to fall way to the back. You wonder if they really were training hard after the tour was over, or was this their plan all along just to get through the Olympics?
Well, keep in mind too, the tour only finished on Sunday, so it was less than a week later, and they were lining up for this race. And the Great Britain team is essentially Team Sky that basically won the tour. They had the first and second guys, but you saw it in Froome, Chris Froome, who was the second place rider at the tour, just didn't have the legs. Wiggins did amazing work, and they had a de facto teammate in Germany's Bernard Eisel, who is a teammate on Team Sky, and they couldn't pin it back. And I think, unfortunately for Cavendish, you can't just rely on your team. If you want to win the Olympic gold medal, you have to be in a move that sticks. And when there's 30 guys in a breakaway, that's not coming back. So, nobody else to blame but himself.
Nonetheless, an impressive gold medal for Kazakhstan. And this is why I like the Olympics, because I always brush up on my English, and allow me to explain that. I learn how to use the adjectival forms of certain nations. For example, someone who is a native of Kazakhstan is a Kazakh.
Mm-hmm.
I learned that the adjective form of Argentina is Argentine. I learn all these terms, and I love hearing it because I like to actually feel cultured and know what I'm saying and say it correctly. So only in the Olympics do I learn this. So let's move on to swimming here. Sorry, Baltimore. Phelps does not even medal in the 400 IM.
And he looked bad in the trials. He didn't even look like he wanted to be there.
He finished, you know, in his heat. He was the last qualifier on time into the final.
And
He
barely snuck in.
barely
400ths of a second, I believe.
got in. You know, but like he said all along, and he said it right after he finished the event 4 years ago, that he didn't want to swim the event anymore. Not sure why he did. You know, it's unlike Michael Phelps to go in unprepared to something. You know, but Lochte just had his number, and
Yeah.
to not be able to get a medal, it's been a while since that's happened. But if you watch the 4x100 relay, he did look very good there. So I don't think it's time to count Michael Phelps out
No,
yet.
and he had the second fastest split other than the Frenchman in close on hill. And it's hard to watch him look so tired after a race, though. You know, I remember in Beijing, he'd finish each race, fist pump in the air, looking strong. They cut to Debbie Phelps, who's, you know, somehow trying to still look excited after 7 or 8 gold medals. You know, it was certainly different this
If
year.
you looked at last year's, 4 years ago, Phelps swimming versus now, you can tell he's not as good a shape because his body is not as high in the water. When he was doing his butterfly, he was almost flat on the water. 4 years ago, his body, he was coming much higher out of the water. Same thing on his freestyle. He was swimming with the shoulders up out of the water almost. He was lying in the water this time. He just doesn't seem as strong.
You know, I think it's a matter of, it really comes down to motivation. And if you put yourself into the position of Michael Phelps, you've won 14 gold medals. You've accomplished literally everything you can. It's got to be hard to get up the next day and just keep going. But for Ryan Lochte, who's older than Michael Phelps, he's really coming into his own now, and he has finally decided, hey, you know, work hard, get good. I'm going to put in this effort, and, you know, I'll see the results.
And he laid waste to the field. And frankly, I thought Michael Phelps was a good sport about it. He tweeted afterwards and say, hey, as long as, basically saying that as long as the gold medal is still being captured by an American, that's good by me. But I think that was a warm-up for him. I think that inspired Phelps, and he looked a lot better in that 4x100 meter freestyle. Anyway, this show is called The Runaround, so we got to talk about running a little bit. Granted, track events haven't started yet. Like I said, they will start on Thursday with the women's 10K, which is going to be a fantastic race. But something to mention here. Paula Radcliffe, the world record holder in the women's marathon, is out of the Olympic marathon due to a foot injury. She effectively ends her dream at capturing an Olympic medal and presumably an Olympic gold medal. She has not won a medal yet and is one of the most storied marathoners in history. She said in her statement, telling everyone that she would not be running the marathon in London, she says, quote, "The most important thing is, as I always believe, to note that you did all you could in going after these dreams, however hard today is, finally closing the door on that dream, at least I can know that I've tried absolutely everything." And that sense of finality in that quote, it just kind of brings chills to me. She's a fantastic runner. She's run 2:15 for a marathon and has yet to capture even a medal in the Olympic Games for the marathon.
You know, and that's just how the Olympics can be. And, you know, for a runner like Paula Radcliffe, who's been so plagued over the years with injuries, it's just, you know, it's really sad to see, especially because it's in London.
Exactly. And I'll never forget in 2004 in Athens when she pulled out, I want to guess around mile 20, I can't remember exactly. She got a lot of backlash from literally the nation of Great Britain. You know, it was almost like they were ashamed of her. They're very serious about this. She's an icon in distance running. And you know, she's held to a high standard, and it's very stressful for an athlete of that level. But it's better to be at peace with that decision. You know, she's 38, I believe, so she's on the older side. Now, granted, that's still normal for elite marathoners to be somewhere in that age bracket. Haile Gebrselassie is 38 or 39, and he's still running. Granted, he's not competing in the Olympics either, but effectively, this is it for her. She won't be back in 2016 in Rio. Anyway, coming up, we're going to be talking to Matt Scherer, the man who makes great 800s happen. He's the pace setter. He's the guy, if you watch track and fields, particularly in the 800, you see someone leading the pack and then drop out with just over a lap finished. He's the guy who does that, but he's not a quitter. He sets the pace for world records and the like. A fantastic story. I can't wait to talk to him. We'll be doing that and more coming up here on the Runaround, ESPN 1300.